without further ado, I'm going to turn things over here to Mr. Kerry.
Okay, sounds good.
Y'all welcome him.
Good morning. When Mike asked me if I'd come and present anything for hot air balloons, I'm all in. I mean, I enjoy aviation. I've grown up. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to fly. I had reasons for not being able to necessarily get into planes, and so it was a little bit. I kind of gave up my love of flight until I came to East Texas. I'm living here. We started getting involved in the Great Texas Balloon Race, and we just started volunteering. As a matter of fact, it's probably, I keep saying 11 years ago, but I think that keeps moving. So probably about 15 years ago, I would volunteer, and no one wanted to take us. They said, "Hey, I'm sorry, we don't want to have a family of 4 that has little kids." And finally, I talked to a pilot, and I said, "Well, they can both saddle a horse," and they're like, "Okay, bring them on." So ever since then, my daughters have been crewing with us, and I'd say about 5 years ago, we started working with a local hot air balloon pilot, and he was pretty much, "Hey, you guys come out." He could call us. He'd have 4 crew members, and if we would say yes, he had everybody he needed. So he would call us. He loved it. And then 2 years later, my youngest daughter, who is over here, Lillian, she came to us and said, "I think I'd like to learn to fly one of those hot air balloons." Okay, we said, we'll do that. Maybe. My wife started looking on Facebook. She knows how to shop on Facebook, and so she would go in there and she would find somebody who's wanting to sell a hot air balloon, and she'd just say, interested. And finally, after about a week of this, I'm like, hey, hold on, stop doing that, because that's as easy as clicking the buy button. And I'm going, we're not going to do that. Well, about a month later, a fella called her up through Facebook and said, "Hey, were you still interested in a hot air balloon?" And she's like, "Well, yes, but let me talk. You can just talk to my husband." So she sent him to me, and I told him, I said, "Look, I don't finance things, so I'm willing to give you an offer, but it's going to be a slap in the face for what you're trying to sell." And I said, "I don't have a truck, I don't have a trailer, so I can't do much with it." And I gave him an offer, and he said, "Yeah, you're right. That's a slap in the face." And so I was like, "Okay, thanks." Well, about an hour and a half later, he called me up and said, "Actually, tell you what, my wife is being transferred to New Zealand with her job, and so we have to sell everything." He said, "I've sold my house, I've sold my boat, I've sold my Harley, my RV, everything." He said, "I've got 2 balloons left, and I have to get rid of them, or I have to store them for 2 years." And he said, "I don't want to do that." He said, "So tell you what, I'll take your offer, and I'll throw a trailer in the boot, and we can do that." But he said the gotcha is all of that has to happen in the next 2 weeks. So the next morning, my wife and I jumped in the car, drove out to Arizona, met his in-laws halfway, handed them a check. They gave us a trailer, and we had no idea what we had just done. I mean, we didn't know what was in this trailer or not. And it's like his mother-in-law comes and says, "Oh, I'll tell you what, last night he was just going into the garage and he was pulling stuff out, and he just kept loading your trailer up." So he said, when it was all said and done, we actually had 2 balloons, or 2 envelopes. One of them was a dead envelope, and then a fully functional balloon. And we didn't have our pilot's license or nothing. And the process to get your pilot license for a hot air balloon is not highly publicized. You can't just go down to the local airport and say, "Hey, I need somebody to teach me how to fly a hot air balloon." And so, I mean, it was a little bit problematic, but what we ended up having was one of the local pilots. Longview has quite a number of hot air balloon pilots, and so we started talking around, and basically what you have is a hot air balloon pilot. I mean, you guys know, you've got student license, you've got your private pilot license, and you've got your commercial license. With the hot air balloons, the commercial license enables you to be able to do training. I mean, it doesn't actually give you the title of CFI, so you can't necessarily go into IACRA and get them set up. But we had one of the local commercial pilots. He said, "Hey, I'll teach you," and
I'll teach you both.
yeah, he said he would teach both of us. And so we're like, okay, let's do that. And so he ended up taking us out to the airport at LeTourneau University. He got with one of the CFIs out there. They went in, did all of our IACRA, got that all set up, and then he started training us. Our training took basically 2 years, and we alternated with our training. So one flight was mine, one flight was hers. A lot of people said, "Oh, I don't think you should do that. One of you just needs to focus on it because otherwise you're going to forget it from one time to the next." Well, I personally, I think if I had done what they had suggested, I probably would not have my license, because my daughter would have her license and she'd be flying a balloon and I'd be crewing for her, and it wouldn't have happened, and I probably wouldn't have continued. But the way we did it worked out perfectly, and so it has been it's been a journey. It's been a lot of fun. Now what I want to do this morning is I'll show you all about hot air balloons. I mean, I've brought the basket with me. You can see it. It's too windy to actually put an envelope up. And I know that Lupita had said we couldn't put up a balloon here anyway right now, and so that's fine. I'm actually on my way to Dallas right now with that balloon. It's due for its annual, so I'm gonna do the annual. What you see here is it's one of our photos that we took, and it's an interesting photo, and I'll come back to it later. The two balloons on the end are mine. The yellow one is the one that my daughter flies, and I fly the multicolor. We've got Bill Bussey out of Longview, Guy Gauthier, and then Eric Wiggins in the middle. And what I wanted to show you, and I forgot to bring my clicker. I mean, like I said, those are mine. Some of my favorite shots. I mean, we do a lot of different events. This was actually over at Paris. But I wanted to show.
Those the ones that was out of commission when you bought it?
No, it's not. Actually, the one that was out of commission was a dead balloon. I ended up sticking that one in my mother-in-law's garage, and I don't know if you leave a hot air balloon for a long time, it starts to smell and mold, and
They are happier flying.
definitely happy being aired out, but it made my mother-in-law's garage smell like popcorn. So
No, not popcorn.
yeah. But basically, this is kind of a little bit of a slide that just kind of shows the different size. I went ahead and plugged in where my balloons fit. And people say, the next question they usually ask is, well, how many people can you put in a hot air balloon? And that can be anywhere from one, which is my wife. She's sitting on what's called a cloud hopper, and that's a propane tank that you sit on, and that's how you fly. Now, if you're doing like a high wind landing on something like that, you don't want to come in forward because you'll break your legs off, but you would come in backwards and land on the tank.
Splash and goes in the cloud hopper?
No, you can do splash and goes in the cloud hopper. It's easier. I mean, yeah, you just have to be careful.
If you wanted to, right?
You just have to be careful. Yeah. Now, the splash and goes. One thing that we've been told, and I've actually not done a splash and go, because as you're coming in, your depth perception is so distorted as you're coming into water, and so I mean, the way they tell you to do it is if you're coming into water, you need to watch the shoreline so that you can see how you're coming in. Otherwise, I have seen people who misjudge that, and
Fill the basket up with water.
they got wet. Yes. And the interesting thing about getting into water is that the basket and the tanks, those will float. So it won't be too concerning, but if you got your envelope wet, it becomes basically an anchor. So it is something I want to do, but I'm going to wait a little while. I'll take the pictures while I'm still above the water. But One thing that's been interesting too is we meet a lot of different people. I mean, when you take off and on this particular flight was maybe 3 weeks ago, we launched from a small area. I ended up flying 1 mile in about 30 to 45 minutes. And then when we landed, here comes the state trooper, and we're going, oh, crud. And the state troopers came over to me rather than going to my wife, for which she was happy. But
They didn't come after me in the truck. They were more after the balloon.
yeah, so, and as it turns out, they were watching me the entire time, and they saw where we were coming down, so they came over. And this young lady was so excited to find a hot air balloon that we went ahead and did a small tether, and she was all excited about it. Her partner was not so excited, but we did end up taking him up as well. We do a lot of different events. We'll go out. A lot of times in the evenings. The only times that we typically will fly is low. It's when the winds are lowest in the morning, 2 hours after sunrise, and then 2 hours prior to sunset. And that's typically what we stick with. There are some exceptions to that, but we'll stay with that for now. We'll go ahead and a lot of times we'll do a glow, and that's what you end up having, like at the Great Texas Balloon Race in the evenings. They'll go ahead and put up lots of different balloons. They'll put it to music, you hit the burner, it looks great for the crowds. And then a lot of times in the morning, you'll have the competitions where you're flying. Do you know how competitions work with hot air balloons? Some people do, some people don't. Basically what it is, they go and they'll give set targets, usually 3 targets, and they'll say, okay, here's the individual locations. They'll give us the GPS coordinates, and then we have to launch 2 miles away from the first target. And if we have to fly in, and typically we will drop a beanbag on the target. They're trying to get a little bit more advanced, which they are doing, and that's they'll go in and they'll give you for example, a rectangle, and your task is that you want to fly into a corner of that rectangle, and you want to be in the rectangle as long as you possibly can. And whoever does that, and they can grade that on a 3-dimensional thing using your GPSs, and they just look at the tracks. And so, I mean, if you can slow down, if you can go corner to corner on the rectangle, then you would take that task. But there's lots of different ways that they do it. And I mean, I think this past year they put maybe that was Albuquerque. They put a boat out in the target area, and they gave everybody a little rubber ducky, and you had to pitch the rubber ducky in the boat, and you could win the boat. So it used to be a key ring that you would fly onto and get to a flagpole. If you get the key, then you get the car. So, and I think now most of the time it's a flagpole with a ring. You get the ring on there, you get to split the pot, and it's usually like a $5,000 or something. So the events are fun. We enjoy those a lot. Similar to the EAA, we also have the BFA, which is the Balloon Federation of America. I just went ahead and pulled kind of their homepage. There's lots of things that they do that you kind of don't see in the background. They are typically the group that handles the competition. If you are ranked in a national standpoint, it's all through the BFA. I'd say one of the big things that the BFA is doing right now, and from a general aviation thing, I'm not sure how much you guys, are you concerned about the drones that are getting ready to start off? Because I think it's just this past week, they set up, the FAA gave, I think, Walmart or Amazon approval for basically unmanned flight up to 400 feet. That becomes more of a problem for balloonists, paragliders, and people who are like that, because we have no electronic systems on our balloons. We don't have an ADS-B, we don't have any transponders, so there's nothing that they can do unless they are able to realize we're there. And you've got a big thing of fabric that's not necessarily doing a whole lot of reflections. I mean, we went out to the tower when Mike had us out to the tower, and they were saying from a balloon standpoint, it looks like a flock of birds on the radar. So it's not real clear. So one of the big things that the BFA has been doing is they've been talking with the FAA and saying, hey, look, you guys can't just give them 400 feet. And the reason at the end of this, I'll show you a little video of why they can't give the 400 feet unless they can see us. So now before I just jump into my little presentation that shows the different parts of the balloon, are there any questions you guys want to know about? Is there anything about balloons that this is supposed to be all about balloons, and I would rather tell you what you want to know. Yeah.
Typically, like a balloon your size, what is the time when your propane runs out?
Okay, right now what I have two 15-gallon tanks in my balloon. Each of those tanks, if I'm dealing with a typical day, 50 degrees out, just me, I weigh 200 pounds, I can fly for 1 hour on one tank. So, so I have two tanks. When I get the one tank, and what I do, my fuel management system is I watch, and when I get down to 30% on one tank, I'm starting to look for a place to land. I still have another hour on my other tank, and so if I start getting down to 30% on that tank, then I've been flying for an hour and a half, and I still have the fuel to get down, but yeah, you always will get down. That's true. It's controlled. That's right. But I mean, that's why I keep 30% in one tank, because if I need to have some heat fast, then I can hit both burners and not run one totally down.
Pounds, not gallons. So.
Well, true. We typically, when we refuel, it depends on how they handle it. The place that we refuel, he has a gauge that rolls gallons. If you take the tank and take it to some place that's not familiar or doesn't have that, they will weigh it. So I mean, a gallon of propane is 4.2 pounds.
Okay.
So.
About 60 pounds.
Right. And then your cylinder, and I've got a stainless steel cylinder, so you're sitting right at 100 pounds per tank. So, yes, sir.
Do any of the balloons, like the one you showed from the little cloud hopper on over to the 110 footer, fall under Part 103, where ultralight, and you don't have to have a license?
No, not for hot air balloons. Yeah.
Just like in here.
Yeah. But I mean, yes, sir.
I have a question for you, just because this will impact me eventually. But you mentioned before about because with the commercial light earth and air, you're authorized to instruct, but you said that you can't go into IACRA. So how do you handle that if you don't know a CFI? How do you even deal with that?
We'll figure that out.
Okay.
Because we're gonna have to figure it out for you.
Yeah. Oh, I know CFIs.
Right.
I know plenty of CFIs
Right.
that can go in there. But my question is, that's sort of stupid. If you're allowed to teach, they should let you be able to go in there and into IACRA.
Right.
So
They just never have formalized flight instruction for hot air balloons, that's all.
That is what it boils down to.
Gyrocopters for a long time.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have any certified gyrocopters they could teach on.
okay.
So
Now, I mean,
there's kind of a gray area in there that they've never cleaned up.
now, do you know does the name Pat Cannon ring a bell with anybody?
Yes.
He is the DE that we bring out of Dallas when for example, when I'm doing my check rides, or not check rides, when I'm doing my test, we'll actually bring him in, and so he does. So I mean, we typically will call him, and he actually helps us up with the IACRA stuff too. So
He's also part of the BFA.
he is the president of BFA. So
Is he a ground observation flight worthy, or does he actually fly?
he flies with us. Yeah, and when I brought him in, he came in on an evening, and I spent the evening with him. He gave me oral that evening, and then the next morning he flew with us. And after half the flight was done, he said, "Okay, you've passed as long as you don't hurt me." So So,
Why
But-
is it that balloons are, I assume they don't fall under the ADS-B regulations?
they do not, because we do not have electronic systems on board.
Yeah, it's like being a Nordau.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, why would you, I mean, I've seen plenty of guys carry their iPads up in their balloons.
I was going to say, I actually have my iPad with me,
Yeah. So
and that same.
doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It doesn't, and if you consider that you can get handheld type equipment like that, and I don't know what's under $1,000. So, when I was actually running for a spot with the BFA, and that was one of the questions. One of the guys came to me. He's a commercial airline pilot, and he was telling me. He said, "So what is your opinion on the ADS-B?" And I said, from the standpoint of where we are as balloonists, I am a proponent of going with an ADS-B on board. I'm probably going to get one eventually. I mean, as soon as I see an accident with a drone and somebody gets hurt, I'm going to be doing something there as well. Just from the standpoint of my background is engineering, and I'm sorry, but if you can take 3 little motors and put them on a little printer, and they have the capability of making such small, fine movements, and they can print something, we've got the technology that we can make the flying safe for all the hot air balloons too.
I think it's the same people that do some of the stuff for general aviation aircraft. They've got a miniature ADS-B out that goes in the little micro drones now. And it's you can power it with a small one.
Is it ADS-B? Because I'm a commercial
It's
drone
ADS-B.
pilot,
It's
and drones are required to have a different thing called remote ID,
yeah.
and those are like $99. But like I said, I'm a commercial drone pilot, so I've had to put up with that.
They actually, so it's because of the military drones I'm working on designing. They're requiring, because they're big.
Okay, yeah, they're big enough that they
1,500
use ADS-B on.
They want an ADS module, but those ADS modules now are about the size of a cigarette lighter.
Yeah.
And they run on like 9-volt transistor battery for like 18 hours.
Yeah.
So, that technology is available right now.
Yeah.
It's not cheap.
Right.
Yeah.
And the ID is cheap. And there's probably a way to use the ID and get the. What you really want to know, or what you really want to do, is broadcast where you're at, so nobody runs into you.
Exactly.
That's all you
It's
do.
a safety. It's a safety
You
issue.
don't need ESPN or
Right.
anything like that. All you need is the ID.
Yeah.
And when an aircraft is assigned an N number, they automatically assign it there's a code that the ADS-B broadcasts.
Yeah. But see,
And that
ultra-
code, code's assigned to the N number. So balloons actually have codes
Yeah.
for them already
They do,
pre-assigned.
they do. Now, yeah, so that's not a big deal. It's just the power part.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for ADS-B. Because that's just extra weight.
Yeah. But I'm not opposed to something of that sort, from my own personal standpoint.
Why would balloonists opt to wait until an accident occurs instead of be proactive? I don't understand that.
I would agree. I mean, and really, with the FAA granting permission to fly at the 400 feet,
Would a drone destroy the envelope then?
it would destroy it.
Yeah.
But the size drones that they're talking about,
Yeah.
it's a dishwasher basically, flying at 60 to 70 mile an hour.
I see.
So,
Oh,
It's just carry a shotgun. What's lighter, a shotgun or the ADS-B out? That's what
I'm already allowed to shoot from my balloon, so I mean,
it's no big deal.
I'm allowed to hunt from it.
Holster up, buddy.
I don't think you're carrying that either. But a lot of times when you fly, you don't do any technology. You
Yeah.
watch the winds.
Yeah.
That's what the fun thing is. I mean, ultralight aircraft have the same fun.
I am
They're flying
curious.
in that 500-foot corridor, the same as
Yeah.
the balloons,
Yeah.
and it's all visual.
Anybody else? Questions? I'm gonna show you.
The young lady here has a question.
Oh, sorry.
How big can a hot air balloon get?
They can get to be, the largest I've seen is, let's see, a cubic foot of air is about the size of a basketball. My balloon, my largest balloon, will hold 69,000 500 basketballs.
Oh,
And mine is a small one. So a large balloon, a large one, probably the largest ones that I've seen, you're looking around 770,000 basketballs. That's almost 1 million basketballs in the envelope. And well, and I mean, one of the things that people don't have any concept for is we always train our crew that when I'm coming in, do not get in front of me. Because right now, my balloon, largest balloon, 69,000 cubic feet, the air inside that balloon weighs about 3,000 pounds. You don't think about the fact that the air weighs 3,000 pounds, but it will mow you over. So.
Not including the weight of the basket and everything underneath it.
That's right. And I mean, the overall, the balloon itself weighs right around, the basket's about 450 pounds, envelope's 200 pounds. So, and then you got 3,000 pounds of air. So, yep. Basically, this is the anatomy of a hot air balloon. A lot of people will ask, well, how do you control it going up and down? The main thing that's going to control it is going to be your parachute. And when I say I've got a parachute on board, they're like, does everybody have a parachute on board? No, it's just the balloon. So what you've got is the fabric is designed such that each of these is what's called a load tape. You've got horizontal load tapes and you've got vertical load tapes. The load tapes are fireproof. They're not going to burn. The fabric, pretty much from about here up, the fabric would burn. I'm on my balloon, even that fabric will burn. So if I burn it, if I scorch it, I'll go in and I have my FAA guy, he puts Nomex in there for me so that I can get to the point where I have all fireproof. It's not Kevlar, but it's a Nomex that doesn't burn. Then you have the throat right in here, and what you'll see is when people are inflating the balloon, they'll be holding that throat, allowing the fan to be blowing the air in. You have a scoop or a skirt, and it's interesting because a lot of people, they'll go in and they say, oh well, I just want to take the skirt off of it. But really what the skirt is doing is it has a means of disrupting the air, the wind that flows across here, and it helps to keep your pilot light from going out. And that's kind of pretty key to everything. And then you've got a crown line. The crown line is tied to the top. I'll tell you a little bit more about that, because when you're going to do this inflation, what you need to do is you need to keep pressure on the top so that all these load tapes stay tight. And so then you got your basket, heating system, and then the actuation line, I call it my red line because it's red. And so you can hit the burner and it's going to inflate everything. You're going to pull the red line and it pulls my parachute out of the top. And once it's out of the top, then your hot air is all going out. And then but as soon as you release that red line, it reseats itself into the top, and then you can add heat. That's how you control the up and down motion. But like I said, you do want to keep those load tapes tight in order to do your inflation. Here's a little bit of a schematic of the burner system. I've got my propane tank, turn on my valve, I've got my pressure, I've got my pilot light, I can turn the pilot light on and off. I've got my blast valve, and I've got my my glow burner. Propane goes up into here, into the heat exchangers, and typically this nozzle is down here. So what will happen is your propane goes up here, comes down through the heat exchangers, because when I hit my burner, it heats those up, and then that heat helps to vaporize the fuel, so that when I hit the burner, it's vapor.
Do you lose any BTUs when you get up way high? I mean,
Yes.
you gotta use a lot more fuel.
You do. And I think what you're looking at is for every 1,000 feet, you're losing about, I think it's 2% efficiency. And people also ask me, well, how high can you go in a hot air balloon? Well, I can go as high as they'll tell you that once you hit like 14.5, then you need to have oxygen. So my personal height that I would set is 10,000. I probably wouldn't go much over that unless I had a reason to do so. I mean, if I was trying to go over a mountain. Around here, the highest I've gone probably is 3,000 feet. But I've also flown out in Albuquerque, and when I take off, I'm already at 5,000 feet. So, hey, then I fly up 1,000 feet and I'm 6,000. So, different means of having different burners. I went ahead and threw this in here because people ask me, what about redundancy on your burner? Are you concerned about one of them not working and then you no longer have, quote, an engine? I fly, and it's only recently, actually my daughter does. She flies with a single burner, but the single burner actually has two burners. It's got two pilot lights, it's got two feeds for propane, so it actually is a double burner. And then you have just a standard double burner, and it will just has one pilot light per, and it's a lot heavier. So I'm in the process of purchasing one of the single burners, and that's what I'm excited about. I know Glenn and I, yes sir, sorry.
Do they have different size burners?
Oh yes.
Yeah, different BTU output.
Yes, they do. It depends on what size your balloon is. I mean,
what is the single one that your daughter's on? What size? What is it measured in BTUs? How do they designate it?
You're probably looking about 19 million BTU. So.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding, guys.
Yeah, it's a lot of BTUs. I was just trying to get a scope of what you're burning.
Right. Yeah, it'll do a hot.
It's a giant flying flamethrower.
Yeah, it'll do a hot air, or it'll do a hot dog pretty quick.
I'm just curious, what brand are you looking at purchasing?
Actually what I've got is an Ultra Magic, and so I'm buying an Ultra Magic burner.
And it's coming from?
From Spain. And you were asking about the efficiencies and everything, so I went ahead and I threw in my weights and balances. This is a standard weights and balances for a 77,000 cubic foot. So when the ambient temperature is about 60 degrees, then say my balloon typically, the highest I would temp it is about 250 degrees. So I could go over the 250 degrees, and then I would come down and see what my altitude is. So all the red lines are different altitudes. So if I came down to at 60 degrees, I would want to stay under my 250, so came down here. Say I want to go to 3,000 feet, come over, then the weight that my balloon can be handling is somewhere between 1,300 and 1,400 pounds. And then of course I know that my hot air balloon weighs 450 on the basket, 200 pounds, so I've got another 600 pounds. Now, the nice thing about that is when I fly colder, I mean, I can carry a lot more. So that's the thought process that we go through when we're trying to determine how much, or if you walk out and you say, hey, can my wife and I go with you? Sorry, I can't. I would say you weigh too much rather than, but that gets into interesting conversations. How much does your wife weigh? I'm not going there. Let's see. One thing I was going to do is just highlight what's my process in the morning. So this is what my process is. I mean, the night before, I tell everybody it's a 50-50 chance whether we're going to fly or not. And then in the morning when I wake up, I go in and I say, okay, right now sunrise is at 7:23. I need 20 minutes to get up, check and see if I'm even going to make everybody get out of bed and go out there and try to get set up. So then I need about an hour to get my truck loaded. I need half an hour to wake up my crew chief. And I need to leave at 7 o'clock. So then we go to a restaurant, typically, where they have an opportunity to have breakfast. And we'll go out, we'll launch a pie ball. A pie ball is a helium balloon. And we'll just let off a helium balloon, and we watch it with a compass. And you can basically look and see which way it's going. It gives you an idea of where you're going to launch. It gives you an idea of the winds, because basically,
At what altitude?
yeah, exactly. Because when you release it, if you time it, then it rises at about 300 feet a minute. So every 30 seconds, if you take a look at where it's at, you can say, okay, at 150 feet, my winds are going this way. When I first take off, the first thing I'll do is I'll go up to about 1,000 feet. I'll go up kind of slow, hit 1,000 feet, and the whole way I'm going up, I'm looking to see which way I'm going. And if I want to go this way, well, then maybe I need to go back down to 500 feet in order to get that right, get that left, or whatever we're trying to do. But keep in mind, with a hot air balloon, I mean, long view is about 10 miles across, and if I get up, the higher you go up, the higher the winds typically go. If I get into a 10-mile-an-hour wind, I've got an hour to be able to get across, and then I'm going to be looking for landing spots. Long view is an interesting place to fly, because there's not the great big fields like you get in lots of smaller communities, the farming areas and such. So it's kind of interesting to, when I learned how to fly, my instructor he would drill into us that you have to be able to do those steep descents. So I mean, we would say, oh, there's a place over there, I'm tracking right for it. You would drop in, and we would sit right across the top of the trees, and if you got a low wind, you come across the top of the trees and you can kind of set it down. But if you're in a high wind situation, you're going to come in across the tops of those trees, and you're going to drop in real fast. I'll pull my red line, I'll hit my burner, and I'll be doing both at the same time. And when I hit, I'm going to deflate. So,
Do you encounter a lot of turbulence, like if you're doing a high wind and you come over the trees into a field?
typically not a lot of turbulence.
Turbulence in there?
No, not so much, because when I know of turbulence, I don't usually fly. You try to look and see, okay, you don't have
Yeah, it's like typically the winds will roll down off the trees.
you don't have some, that you'll see that more in mountain type flying, over the ridges, not so much on the trees. So, and one of the things that it kind of surprises people is we use trees as brakes. And I mean, last time that I was flying, a young lady was with me, and I told her, I said, listen, the winds are a little bit higher. We're flying at about 10 miles an hour. So that when we're drop in, I said, I use a tree and I'll use it as a brake, so we will probably hit a tree. And I said, that's it, that's planned, that's the way I'm gonna do it. And she's like, okay, no problem. And I said, when we're coming toward the tree, I said, just jump down in the basket, protect yourself from it. And that works out fine. We came in, I don't know if you know where the electric cowboy is over here on Longview, but I came in across their parking lot. I missed the parking lot. And there's a Guthrie Park is around the far side. I've landed there before. Coming in, I kind of misjudged it a little bit, coming down a little faster than I wanted to. I hit the tree. I was still at basket level, coming across the top. I hit the tree, and I totally forgot about the season we're in, and pollen doused us. And that's all fine and dandy. And then, but later, when we were doing our debrief and everything, we're talking about it, you know, pollen's explosive in a cloud. And I've got a burner sitting on top of me. And so, I mean, it's a matter of, sometimes the things you don't necessarily think about are some of the things that you need to be careful of. I don't want my hair to be singed for that. So.
Any liability insurance required, or you ever use it?
We do carry liability insurance, yes.
Who writes it? Airplane people?
No, they are familiar with aviation. A company called RPS is who my insurance is through. There's also one called Acrosure. And then, there's another one. I would like to say them since I'm being filmed, but I can't remember them. Sorry. But typically, so we'll go do our flight. We'll jump back in the truck. We go back to the restaurant. Everybody has their vehicles right there, and we have breakfast. So that's kind of our flight plans. But everything starts off pretty quick. One thing I went ahead and did too is takes about 20 different steps to be able to get the balloon ready to launch. One of the things that we look at is when we're looking at a field, trying to figure out if we're going to launch, what are your objects that you got to be concerned of? I mean, you've got a tower here, you got a fence here. Can you see the problem in that one? It's a little bit small, but I don't know if you can see it.
Most East Texas fields.
There's a power line right across the field.
And there's most that come right through the center.
Yeah, and something about East Texas, they will go in and you've got all your cattle out there, and they'll have a power line right down the middle of your field. And
I like parking lots.
parking lots are nice. Yeah, you don't have to worry so much about them. Sometimes you have to deal with those too.
Except for Walmart where they're launching drones.
Well, that too. The smaller drones are not such a problem. It's going to be the bigger ones that want to deliver stuff.
Right.
When we get there, we basically pull up. We pull out the basket. We pull out the envelope. We assemble the burner like we did this morning, and we have the base of our instruments, altimeter, temperature, and such, which is battery operated. So.
And the ball instrument is circa what?
Yeah,
80s?
it's old, but I like mine.
Do you use a written checklist, or I could see where somebody could be in a hurry because they really want to get a flight in and miss a cotter pin or something. So do you have a written checklist you're going by?
I do have a written checklist.
Second set of eyes come through behind you.
Now, typically every morning I don't use it every time I fly, but I worked from. I mean, I developed my own checklist. I went through. I've got 3x5 cards that I've got for each step. So, two different ways that you can lay out your balloon, and then you've got your fan. I usually set my fan on one side, and that's based on the direction the exhaust of the fan is. I don't want it all on where I'm working. They show that you can put little flags on here if you want to see how well your fan's blowing. I don't worry about fans, or I don't worry about it. It's blowing up, and I can get it in the air. Crown line. There's two different ways that people do it typically. Most people will only use a single crown line, and that's what I have. I have an extra crown line that if I got into a windy situation and I was at like an event, a glow or something, then we would go ahead and we might put a second one on it.
So the line that runs your parachute is on the inside.
Correct.
Is there ever any danger of burning that thing up?
Yes, there is, but it is Kevlar. Or it actually has a Kevlar internal, and then it has the external. But yes, it still could. It can be cut. It can be burned.
And there's no plan B to get that thing open?
No, but I practice a lot without using that for my landings and such.
Yeah.
It's not easy, especially in the Longview area, because I mean sometimes you have to put it down on a dime.
Yeah.
So.
But your instructor was meticulous about not using the red line and just landing the balloon.
Yeah, my instructor he did emphasize that I be able to land it without having to, and to an extent. I mean, there's some times when we're flying in, and sure I can let it drop, but if I need to get down, I'd still use it. Ascents, descents, maneuvering, contour flying is actually some of my favorite flying, right on top of trees, and that's why I like to fly where There's just nobody. It's nice. Huh? Do what? Well, see, that is the concern. And I mean, because honestly, I mean, I fly contouring so that I can get good enough that when I'm looking for that landing spot, that I can be sitting right across the top of trees. Because I mean, the biggest danger for hot air ballooning is power lines, and I mean, it's not unusual for power lines to be in the trees. So the different ways that we do our descents, a slow descent or a fast descent. I would say right now the fastest I've had my balloon coming down is about 1,000 feet a minute, and you feel it, and so I mean it's kind of a rush, but it's not. I mean, but by the same token, I mean the balloon could handle. I mean, doing a terminal descent. I mean, I basically went to 3,000 feet and just let it cool off and come down, and it got up to about 1,000 feet per minute. But then if I went to 3,000 feet and pulled the top to allow it to come down faster, yeah, I think it'd come down. I haven't necessarily had a chance to do that. And part of the reason for it is Longview's 10 miles across. If I go up and I get into a wind, I don't have the time to keep going as high as I'd like. So
It can be a wild ride.
yeah.
How instantaneous on like a rapid descent, you got the red line pulled, you let it go before that descent stops and back into normal flight?
It all depends on how much I burn then. So my burners can turn me pretty quickly. My Aerostar, my larger balloon, is not as fast. It's about a 15-second lag. With the Ultra Magic, it's pretty darn fast. I mean, as a matter of fact, the first time I flew my Ultra Magic, I was looking at a spot. I was maybe 50 feet off the ground. I pulled the red line. I'm coming in at a pretty fast descent, and I'm going, okay. So I hit the burner. I didn't hit it very long, and all of a sudden I'm going the other way. I'm going, whoa, crap! So I'm back to pulling the line. So, and that was that's just practice. So, but with the Aerostar 2, when I was doing my ride with Pat Cannon, he told me go to 500 feet. I go up to 500 feet. He's okay, now land in that front yard. So I pull the line, and what I find is that every balloon has a different way of operating. My balloon, when I pull the red line and I hold it out, the manual will tell you 6 seconds is the max. But when I pull my red line and hold it out, I feel the balloon go, whew. And then I let my red line go, and I know that I'm coming down. When I was with Pat, he told me, if you leave it open for about 2 seconds longer, you know you'd be able to get down faster. And I said, yeah. I also have had a high wind descent or high wind landing where I pulled that thing out and we hit hard. And I said, keep it out for another 2 seconds and we're going to be on the ground. So, I mean, it's all learning the balloon. It's how fast and how much you...
It's also how porous your balloon is.
True. I mean, the porosity of the fabric has something to do with it as well, and how old's the balloon. And I threw this slide in here because this is one of the reasons that I got into balloons. Not for the rules, but when you're flying, if you got somebody down below you, he can't see you. So the lower balloon has the right of way. So the guy up above, I mean, but by the same token, it's also, when you're that close, you can hear the guy burning and you can say, hey man, I'm right over top of you. And you can coordinate it that way too.
And your crew chief is the one who has eyes on it.
Yes. Yep.
I think that gets wild in Albuquerque.
It does get wild in Albuquerque, that's for sure. And I mean, that's...
Carry a whistle.
Yeah, carry a whistle, foghorn, whatever. But I also, like my Ultra Magic also has it, when the guy designed it, he had it set up, it's got Teflon windows in the upper portion. So you can look up through it, and it's pretty cool. This is one of the things that got me into ballooning. It's called false lift. I just thought it was extremely cool. When somebody sets up their balloon and they're in a field, if you got trees around you and the balloon sticks up a little bit above the tree and you get a wind going across it, you've got a wind foil. or an airfoil, and it can cause you to be pulled off the ground. And so I mean, there's lots of dynamics that go into the into ballooning for sure. And then in-flight emergencies. I'm gonna go ahead and go through. You already asked about the my red line. Can something happen to that? Yes, it can. Malfunction of the pilot light. I've already discussed a little bit about that. Fuel management. I mean, you do everything you can. Like I said, I have 30% left in this tank when I'm starting to burn on the other one, and I'm starting to look for a landing spot. Now, I mean, it's happened in the past where if you look at my tanks, the gauge on the tank shows 60%, but if it's totally empty all the way around, it looks kind of like it says 60%. So you have to be careful because, you know, I took it in for an annual. He had to empty the tank. It's totally empty, and we didn't realize that one tank, and I missed it. So.
And we were in a flight one time.
Yeah.
And before we realized
Yep.
there was no fuel.
And then it's time to get down. So, so you have to be careful. I mean, everything you're doing, I think you guys know from the flight, from fixed wings.
Are you worried at all about static electricity discharges? Your last thing on the list is fuel leak, and I'm just wondering if you dress differently and
We don't typically dress differently. We do check for leaks. I mean, it's with it being propane, it is a pretty distinct smell. I mean, you can hear it. That was one of the things when we set this one up out here. He was filming. He had a little bit of the film, and he was playing that. And so my daughter, she comes over and she's looking all around, going, "What's going on?" I said, "Don't worry. She's like, "Okay." I kept hearing the fuel, and she was concerned about that. But I mean, you can hear it, you can smell it. I mean, some of the best smells in the world to me is bacon and propane in the morning. I mean, so. One of the things that we do, I've mentioned it, is what we call a pie ball. A pie ball is a helium balloon. We go ahead and we will release those. Kind of one of the rules on that is if you can put your arm at a 45-degree angle after you've released a pie ball, if it's above you, then you know that the winds up above you are probably not much more than 5 knots. If it's down below your arm, you know that it's higher winds because the winds are holding it down. So, and if you release a pie ball and it goes like this and then comes back down, just go inside.
Yeah.
So.
Go to breakfast.
Yeah. Well, it happened to us over at Canton, and I mean that was one of those days when we had tornadoes and everything. So we just kind of went back and hung out in the hangar. One of the interesting things here too is, I mean, by releasing a pie ball, the BFA is currently developing an app that you can take your phone, and they do a 3D print of a mount to put your phone, and then mount a scope on the top of it. And so if you take that and you put it on a tripod, you can tilt the thing, and if you keep it on the hot air balloon, if you know that a hot air balloon is rising at 300 feet a minute, then the app can take a reading every 30 seconds, and it can plot basically what are the winds. And then it becomes a vector analysis. It's just physics. I mean, here's your reading. You take that reading, and here's your next reading. Then your winds at that level are that angle. So I mean, so like I said, they are working on an app that can develop so you can see what those winds are before you launch. Another function of drones is you take the drone, you fly it up to 400 feet, and we also have an app that'll the drone will try to adjust so it stays in the same location. And it can tell you what the winds are and what the speed and the direction.
I need to find out what that app is again.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool.
Yeah, I gotta get that.
Some of those functions.
Put that on my baby drone.
There you go.
Not the big boy. I'm gonna put it for the baby.
Is there any other questions before I keep going? Okay. We use a variety. Oh, go ahead.
Got one. Okay. We used to live out in the Imperial Valley, California, where it gets 126 degrees, and one of my neighbors flew. At what time and what temperature you'd say, hey, we can't, it won't even carry me?
For my balloon, it was about 94 degrees because I wanted to do a flight, and the winds were perfect. Everything was awesome, but the temperature was about 90, 94. And it was a summer evening flight that I wanted to do, but it was too hot. So, and you guys probably know the same saying that we tell everybody. I'd rather be on the ground wishing I was in the air than in the air wishing I was on the ground. So we use a variety of different apps that for determining will we fly, what are the winds. I mean, in the morning when I wake up, first thing I hit is the weather bug. I just check the radar, see what it looks like. Sometimes I use radar scope, but my daughter uses that one more than I do. Then I hit Wonder Underground or Weather Underground and determine, okay, because typically the winds are a little bit lower with Weather Underground, but they seem to be more accurate because they're being used, they're using a lot of the personal weather stations to come up with some of those. And so what I found is that tends to be a little bit more accurate. Aero weather, when I wake up and I look at aero weather, I just look at the local airports. Is it IFR, VFR? If it's IFR, I roll back over and go back to sleep. Well, I usually text my crew and tell them.
Did you put weather briefer on your call-in, on your morning routine?
I didn't mention that, but yeah, I always call the weather briefer and at least have a flight plan logged. And I typically will tell them I'm flying in the Gregg County area and give them the KGGG, and they give me the weather brief for that. I know I can go online and do that, but I like to talk to people. So we also use a program called Glimpse, and let's see. Well, with the Glimpse, what that is that tracks my phone. My wife is able to see where I'm at.
Your crew chief is able to find you.
Yeah, and typically people will ask us, well, how many people does it take to fly your balloon? And it'll take my crew chief, and we like to have a navigator. That way she doesn't have to be messing with tracking and the radio and everything while she's driving. This is just what the different apps look like. You might be familiar with the weather bug, Weather Underground, Aero Weather, and then this one you might not be so familiar with. It's called Ryan Carlton, and what it does is they go through and they give you different winds at 0 feet, 100 feet, and it tells you what the wind directions are and how many knots you're looking at. And
What's its nickname?
yeah, the nickname for that is Lying Ryan.
Oh.
Sometimes.
It's never accurate.
And I mean, it's based off of national weather stuff, but I like to use that because if nothing else, it kind of gives me an idea of where's the wind out of.
Is there a delay or is it in real time?
It's pretty much in real time, and but from what my perspective is you go out and put up a pie ball. That's where you're going to get your most accurate, and that's your accurate winds. However, people who I like using Ryan Carlton. In my opinion, it's a good place to start. But then I go to the PWS monitors, and that's all the personal weather stations that are local. And so I go into a Longview one, and the main thing I'm looking at, sustained winds and wind gusts. And then I scroll down, you've got your sustained winds are in the red, gusts are green, and then you got your wind directions. Here it is, basically variable. It's all over the place. So a lot of people like to use ForeFlight, and I think fixed wings tend to go that route too. But what we'll do is we use an app called Hot Air, and it's very similar to ForeFlight. I use it for my logbook. It also interfaces with the Glimpse, and so that it'll be able to track. And then I can go in and I can add locations on the map just like you can on ForeFlight. And since the Great Texas Balloon Race is in Longview area, they've come up with, okay, here's areas that are red zones. You don't want to fly, you don't want to land. You got green zones, and then you got yellow zones. And I can see that basically live as I'm flying across them. So, and I mean, a lot of the red zones, there's cattle. You don't want to be flying too low, so you stay 500 feet above them, usually more than that. Yeah. Yeah, it's the angry farmers that you're dealing with. I mean, I was shopping for insurance, and I asked, the guy told me he was a go-getter kind of insurance guy, and he said, man, tell you what, he said, we're really good with our insurance, and we'll cover everything. We got you covered, man. He said, as a matter of fact, he said, I'm a pilot too. I was flying the other day. He said, I'm coming across the field. I look over and I see the farmer. He's looking over at me, and he said, I hit that burner, and wouldn't you know it? He said that goat that was standing right next to him fell over. He said that goat just laid over. He said, did you know my insurance bought that guy a new goat? And I'm going, you know what? I think there's goats that just fall over when they get scared.
Yeah.
I think he now has 2 goats. So.
There is an airstrip called Fainting Goat. It's in Blum, Texas. That's the closest place here to get gyroplane training. All things. I've actually been there. It's actually called Fainting Goat. You can look it up.
Tethering balloons. One of the things that we'll do when we're training is we'll go ahead and we'll put a tethered balloon up. It allows you to take it 100 feet up and just practice, because it takes a little practice to feather in your landings and not slam into the ground. But at the same time, you go 100 feet up and pull the top off, you ought to at least do that once or twice just to make sure just so you know what is going to happen when you do hit.
A lot of tethering at events.
Yeah. A lot of people like to ride up and down. And then back to my original slide. The thing that I was going to tell you about this particular flight that was interesting was you have to always stay on your toes. The guy in his balloon went ahead and he launched first that morning. He took off, and I saw him disappear over the tops of the trees. I was in mine, my daughter was in hers, and then Eric went ahead and launched. Eric is my daughter's boyfriend anyway, by the way. And so he took off. And as soon as he took off, he went this way. Guy went this way. Eric went this way.
And Scrub came in.
And then all of a sudden, Dr. Bussey took off, and he was just about over the tops of the trees. And all of a sudden, over the radio, you hear Guy yelling, "Abort! Abort! Abort!" And we're like, "Huh?" And we turn around, and we look back, and there was a Scud layer that was just driving toward us. It was fog. And I mean, it was just, and we're like, wow. So my daughter and I pulled ours down, and yeah, we didn't launch. And then we ended up chasing and finding Eric because he'd gone way off. I mean, get in the fog and you can't see trees and power lines, and it's a big deal. So, well, is there any other questions?
Have you ever put pencil and paper, figure out your cost per hour?
I'm sorry, say again?
Cost per hour.
We try to avoid that.
Insurance is due now. It's very expensive.
Yeah. I mean, if you throw out insurance and the fact that I'm getting ready to do my annual, I mean, I would say insurance and annual is going to run me $2,000 to $2,500 for a year. And then each flight, if I fly for 1 hour, if I have somebody with me and such, I'm spending 20 gallons of propane, and right now it's running about $3 a gallon. So that's your flight cost, pretty much. So.
Are you responsible for paying for breakfast for your food?
No comment. No. No. I mean, I do like to. We try to, but one of the interesting things, and one of the blessings actually, is by doing it through, we've made a club, we've made a Facebook group. We've got a lot of people who come out, and if you have one balloon that flies, and you have 20 people that show up, it's hard to get lunch or breakfast for everybody. Oh, yeah. But I mean, if you could, so we've even had discussions on who can we do, how, and I mean, we want to be courteous and we want to reward them. So one of the things too that we'll do is if you come out and crew with me and you've been doing it for a while, I mean, there might be a morning where I've got enough crew, hey, you want to go with me? And so I mean, that can be a reward to it too as well.
But it was never the goal.
It wasn't the goal, but when you're a student pilot, it's not even an option. When you're a private pilot, it's kind of a nice thing to offer. So.
Also, you mentioned, where's a lot of this equipment made? Is there American manufacturers doing this, or is it all European?
Aerostar, I'm not sure they make balloons anymore. They were American based. Ultra Magic is based, I think they've got a plant in Mexico, and then their main plant is in Spain. And those are the ones I mainly know because that's what I own. You also have Lindstrad's a big name in ballooning.
Is Colt still around? Like one I've showed pictures.
Thunder and Colt.
Colt.
Yeah, they. I think it may be I'm not sure of the history on that, so don't quote me on that. But Thunder and Colt is still around.
It's still around, but it's not manufactured. There's no more made. Same with Aerostar. It still exists, but they're not creating balloons anymore. Cameron, Lindstrand, Ultra Magic, Adams,
Head balloons.
There's a variety of different manufacturers that create them.
My repair shop, they are delving into manufacture of balloons as well. They're more the small hoppers, and so.
As you mentioned, you're going to Dallas to get yours annually. Is there a shop there that specializes in balloons?
There is one, a kind of a small shop over in Longview that they do them there as well, and I like Joe and Lynn Patty. They're great people. They do a great job. I've always taken mine. The story of getting into ballooning with us has been it's been a big blessing, and there's been a lot of people who along the way who've really helped us, and so that's kind of why I stick with where I'm at. So, any other questions? You want to go fly with me?
Let's do it.
Like I went ahead and I did set up the balloon outside. You're welcome to.
Basket.
Oh yeah, sorry, the basket outside. You're welcome to look at it, see. My daughter will even fire it up for you if you're cold, and see. And like I say, I'll pull that single burner out if you want to see the difference between my double and my single.
I do have one. Like your big balloon, you bought it used. What does a new one like that cost? Full, not trailer, truck or anything, but
Yep.
like the full balloon rig tanks.
Full balloon basket's going to run you about 25. Balloon will run you about 45. So you're probably, yeah. So you're right in the 70,000.
You can pay as much as you do for a car.
Or an airplane.
You can get a used one that's not too much.
You can go places.
Yeah, and I mean that would be, and I actually just recently got a quote for that. That's why I can give you an answer for that. And it was a 105, so that's 105,000 cubic foot, and that's a nice size balloon because it'll hold 3 to 4 people easy, plus the pilot. So.
Pretty good.
Thank you. That's a really good presentation.
Cool. Sounds good.
Well, okay, I don't know if it has, I don't know if it has like a little helium tank.
When I brought in Lima Foxtrot,
But it's like
Like if you were to hit a power line, I'd much rather be in one that has a Kevlar cables than steel.
Gotcha.
I would love to have a dog that enjoyed doing this. You could basically, you could burn panels out of the bottom and still fly. But I mean, if I were to burn panels out of the bottom, I'd be looking for a spot to land.